Okay, so imagine this. You're a doctor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're in a busy emergency room.
Oh, yeah.
A family's anxiously waiting to hear about their loved one.
Right.
And you have to deliver the news that, well, things aren't good.
Tough situation.
Yeah, how would you even begin to approach that conversation? Like, how do you break bad news?
It's tough, for sure. But, thankfully, there's this framework called Spikes.
Spikes.
Yeah, Spikes.
Okay.
It's super helpful for healthcare providers, really helps to navigate these really sensitive conversations.
Interesting. Tell me more about Spikes.
Sure. So it stands for setting, perception, invitation, knowledge, emotions, and strategy.
Okay, so each part of that, each letter is a step.
Yeah, pretty much. Each element helps you, create that compassionate and effective approach for delivering bad news.
I see. So it's not just about what you say,
Right.
but also like the whole approach, how you say it, the setting, all that.
Exactly. It's about the whole picture. So let's start with the first one, setting the stage.
All right, setting the stage.
You got to think about the environment. Is it private? Is it quiet?
I see. You want to make sure the family feels comfortable enough to express their emotions, without feeling like they're on display.
Exactly. A busy hallway or a crowded waiting room, not the best place for this kind of conversation.
Right, yeah, definitely not. So ideally, where would you have this conversation?
You want a dedicated space, somewhere where you can talk to the family without interruptions, a place that provides privacy and respect during a tough time.
That makes sense. And sometimes having other loved ones present can be helpful too, right? For support.
Absolutely. Having a familiar face there can make a huge difference.
Okay, so setting, super important. What's next?
So next comes perception. Before you jump into the news, you really got to understand what the family already knows.
So you might ask something like, what do you understand about your loved one's condition so far?
Exactly. That way you can, gauge their understanding and tailor your approach. Make sure you're both on the same page.
That's a good point. Okay, so setting, perception. What's next?
Now it's time for the invitation stage.
Invitation.
Yeah, this one's about respecting the family's readiness to receive information.
I can see how that's important. Some people might want every single detail, while others might prefer a more general overview.
Precisely. You could ask something like, would you like me to explain everything in detail? Or would you prefer a summary? Give them some control over the flow of information.
Yeah, that makes sense. During a stressful time like that, having some control, even over something small like that, must feel, reassuring.
Absolutely. Helps them feel more in control when everything else feels out of control.
Right. Okay, so we've covered setting, perception, and invitation. Now, what about actually delivering the news itself? I imagine that's the hardest part.
It is. And that's where knowledge, the K in Spikes, comes in. Be clear and direct.
Clear and direct.
Yeah. And avoid medical jargon. Use simple language that everyone can understand.
So no complex medical terminology that might confuse them further.
Sure. Exactly. Think of it like explaining it to a friend or family member who isn't in healthcare.
Okay, that's a helpful way to think about it.
Yeah. Clear and concise, that's key.
Makes sense. But even with the most carefully chosen words, emotions are going to run high, right? So how do you handle that?
Yeah, that's where the emotions part comes in. Acknowledge and validate their feelings.
Validate their feelings.
Yeah, it's natural for them to be upset, angry, maybe even in denial.
Yeah, for sure.
So let them express their emotions. Instead of saying, don't worry, try something like, I can see that you're very concerned.
Yeah, I can see that you're very concerned. Is a much better approach. It shows that you're acknowledging their feelings.
Exactly. Create a safe space for them to process everything. It shows you understand.
And it sounds like active listening is really crucial here, paying attention to their verbal and nonverbal cues.
It's huge. Sometimes just being present and truly listening is the most powerful thing you can do. It really is. And after the news sinks in a bit, once the initial shock has passed, then you can start talking about next steps.
So that's the strategy part of Spikes.
That's it. You want to give them some sense of direction, something to hold on to.
I can imagine that would be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Even in a crisis, having some kind of plan, even a tentative one, must be reassuring.
Absolutely. It's about giving them a roadmap, So you might say something like, okay, let's talk about what happens next.
Makes sense. So at that point, you'd outline the next steps in their care.
Exactly. Whether it's more tests, surgery, or even palliative care, honesty and transparency are super important here.
Right, because ultimately it's about helping the family make informed decisions about their loved one's care.
Exactly. And don't forget to ask them if they have any questions. What questions do you have for me? give them the space to voice any concerns, anything that's unclear.
It's about empowering them to be active in their loved one's care as much as possible.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of difficult conversations, I remember this one time early in my career.
Oh.
I had to break some bad news to the wife of a patient who had a ruptured aortic aneurysm.
Oh, wow. Aortic aneurysms, those can be so sudden and devastating. What happened?
So the patient arrived at the ER. He was unconscious. We rushed him into surgery, but we couldn't save him.
Oh, gosh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it was tough. And I was the one who had to tell his wife.
Wow, that must have been incredibly hard for both of you. How did you even begin to approach that?
Looking back, I wish I had done a better job with the setting, that S in Spikes.
What do you mean?
The hospital was just packed, it was chaotic. And we ended up having this incredibly sensitive conversation in a busy hallway.
Oh, no, that sounds so far from ideal.
It was. There was just noise and commotion everywhere. Not the calm, private setting she deserved,
Yeah, not at all. So how did you handle the perception part? Did you have a sense of how much she understood about her husband's condition before going in?
Actually, that part was okay. She'd seen him collapse at home, so she knew it was serious.
So having some context helped bridge that gap.
It did, yeah. But looking back, I really rushed through the emotions part. I was so focused on just getting the facts out that I didn't fully acknowledge what she must have been going through.
Yeah, I can see how that could happen. It's easy to just focus on the clinical side of things in those moments and forget the human impact.
Exactly. I should have just been more present,
Yeah.
More empathetic. Just sat with her in silence for a bit, let her process the news.
It's about giving them that space to breathe, to grieve, to just be.
Yeah, you're right. It's not about fixing or minimizing their feelings. It's about honoring them.
So it sounds like that experience really solidified the importance of Spikes for you.
It did, for sure. It taught me that even with the best intentions, we can still miss the mark if we don't approach these conversations with real care and sensitivity.
It sounds like a real turning point in your approach to patient care.
Yeah.
Did it change the way you handled the strategy part as well?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I realized that I needed to be more proactive in helping families figure out those next steps. So instead of just listing options, I started asking more questions. Things like, what's most important to you right now? Or how can we support you and your family during this time?
That's such a great way to shift the focus from just delivering information to really partnering with the family.
It is. And honestly, it makes such a difference. When families feel empowered, like they have some agency and control, even in such a difficult time, they feel less lost.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing their needs and working together to find a way forward, even when things are incredibly tough.
Yeah.
So Spikes is really more of a framework, not a rigid script. It's about adapting those principles to each unique situation.
Exactly. And the more you use it, the more intuitive it becomes.
While breaking bad news is never easy, we can use strategies like Spikes to make those moments a little less daunting, both for ourselves and for the families we care for. And to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Spikes framework. We hope you found it valuable, and we hope that you can apply what you've learned to your own practice. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to our channel by clicking the subscription button. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment below in the comments section.